Yeah? Everything's good? Seder. Okay, we're going to talk about Ezer Hashem Yisborach. We're going to talk about the Dalek Kaisos. And the Tzura, the whole structure of the Haggadah is about four. Everything is about four. The main things of the Haggadah is all structured in fours. So you have, obviously the Dalek Kaisos, and you have the four cups, the four sons, the four brachas, the four kashas, four questions. So it's the idea of structured of four, but if you'll understand a little bit deeper, you'll see that there's actually a hidden dimension, which is the fifth. Which we understand the fifth dimension, once we understand what the four is, we'll understand what the five is, we'll understand there's something much deeper. So we have to understand first a little bit, what is this structure for? And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the structure of the Haggadah of the whole Seder night is from Chazal, right? It's not in the Torah. And the Torah doesn't speak about making a Seder Pesach night. The Torah talks about eating Matzah and Pesach and eating Mar. But the whole idea of the structure of a Seder doesn't say in the Torah. The Seder is very old. It goes back, to the Zman Mishnah, the times during the Mishnah. We have this idea of there's a Seder, there's a Mishnah. A lot of things that we do during the Seder, during Haggadah, is actually mentioned in the Mishnah. But the Chakrim will say that it's structured after an ancient Greek structure, which is that the Greeks had this idea of what they call the Symposium, which is like an intellectual meal. And in this intellectual meal, they used to ask four questions. They used to drink 4 cups of wine. And it was a meal that they made a feast, and then they did other stuff, which is the Shlit. But the structure, the intellectual part of it, was that they introduced 4 questions, and they discussed throughout the night these 4 questions. They drank 4 cups of wine. We have a remnant of this idea in the Mishnah, like for example, in the 4th Perek of Mishnah, is a big Avos. We have Eze Gibor, Eze Asher, Eze Mechubah, right? This idea of who is this person? This is like a question that was asked. Like, who is the rich person? Who's the wise person? He's a chacham. And then you discuss it. So it seems that Chazal adapted this type of version of this, obviously within a holy context, and they created this idea of the Seder during the early time of the Mishnah period, the beginning of the second. Sometime during the second Pesach English time period. We know the first time we see this idea of a Seder. But you'll see that there's some oimek, there's a very deep depth to this, that it's not it. It's not the 4th. There's actually something deeper, much more interesting, because it's the 5th. Now the general structure of 4 is very simple, because the structure of 4, before we get into all the deeper understandings of 4, the general structure of 4 is basically you have a statement, right? Then you start with a question. The question gets a certain resolution, a certain answer. Then you ask a counter question, then you come to a higher resolution. That's the structure of 4. So the whole idea of the Seder is which is the idea of a question and answer format. And according to the Greeks, according to many, that's the whole mitzvah of the night, is it has to be b'derech shel v'tshuva, has to be with a question and answer. So the question and answer is like there's a thesis, an antithesis, and a synthesis. This is like the structure. So you have 4 of you have a question, you answer the question, you say, but you can learn differently, then you come to a higher resolution. This is the general structure, and it's based on the idea of a peer, of peers, which with Chazal actually called zugas. When the Gemara talks about the Dalek Kaisos, and it says, how can you drink 4 cups of wine? The Gemara says, you can only drink 4s. 4s are zugas. Zugas are pairs, and we don't do things in pairs. And one of the answers of the Gemara says that it's lo shmurim, right? Shmurim and mazikim. So therefore, we're not worried about anything that's negative. So the structure appears. But if you look deeply, very simply, the entire structure of Pesach by night, the whole idea of the Seder is actually in pairs. Pairs means that there's a question and there's an answer. There's redemption and there's slavery. We eat foods that represent Shiva Mitzrayim, You eat more, and then you eat drink cups of wine that represents cheres, freedom. We do both maschil mignus and Messiah mishvav. So there's always this idea of opposites, right? That's the general structure is always double. There's because that's the story. The story is we came from slavery and we redeemed. So to represent these two elements, first of all, the recognition that we were and where we are now, there's also this idea of two. So two becomes four as a bigger structure. Now, in our Gemara, in the Bavli, the Gemara actually doesn't give a reason of the four cases, right? The beginning of Pesach just says that a Filon Yisrael has to be Mesav, has to have the other cases. Every person should have these 4 cups of wine, but it doesn't give us a reason why we have to have these 4 cups of wine or what they represent. But in the Yerushalmi, in our Pesachim, the Yerushalmi does say a few reasons. And if you look at the bottom, the Gemara says, Menayin la'abrakoisis, how do you know 4 cups? So Rabbeinu Keneged about Gulas. It's Keneged the 4 Gulas, which is the most famous reason. The four forms of redemption, which is the Yitzesi, the Yitzalti, the Alti, the Lekachti. That's the first thing in the Gemara. These are Keneged Abo Kois Shalpare. These are Keneged, they correspond to the 4 cups. They're cups. They correspond to the 4 cups with the story of Yosef and Pare. And Levi Yomer Keneged Abo Malchius. Keneged the four kingdoms. What is this the idea of the 4 kingdoms? So the 4 kingdoms is a very famous medrash. It's actually one of the first medrashim in Medrash Rabbah and Bereshis, where it talks about that it talks about these 4 things. So these 4 levels of galus, of exile, and actually we also even have this in last week's parsha, for example, in Parsha Shmini, where it talks about the 4 non-kosher animals that have only one of the simonim. So there's 3 that is a malas geira but not a fresis parsa, right? So there's 3 of those animals, which is a gumel, or nevis, and a shafam, and the 4th is a fresis parsa, but not a malas geira, which is a chazer. So these 4, and this is many times throughout in the vision of Avraham Avinu, these 4 correspond to the 4 great exiles, which is the exile, which is the Babylonian, Golus Baal, which is the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. So that's the first exile, the first Golus. Then there is the story of Purim, which is Golus Madai, which is the Persian exile. Then there is the story in the second Beis Hamikdash, which is Golus Yavan, which is the Greek exile, which is the story of Hanukkah. And then the 4th is Golus Roimi, which is the current exile with the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. Where is Golus Yishmael, for example, because that's the story of Jewish history ends up not only. So that's a big machlokes between the Ibn Ezra, even the Maral. Everyone gets involved with exactly how does Golus Yishmael, because if you count Bavel Amadei as 1, then you'll actually have Bavel Amadei 1. Then you'll end up with Yishmael, or the Maral writes that Yishmael is a separate thing. But these are the 4 collective exiles. So the cups that we drink, the 4 cups of Dalakoisis, correspond to these 4. If you look at the next page, when it's the last Rashi, so it's in the right column, the last Rashi, we go on Kufches and Psachim. So Rashi actually, very interestingly enough, when Rashi brings down, when the Gemara says that Nashim Chayavis V'Abal Koisis, that even women are obligated to drink the 4 cups, not just men, on the night of Pesach. So Rashi writes on the right column, this is a Rashbam, but the Rashi is end. So Rashi writes, these are Shoshu Keneged Gibel Koisis Shnemer and Pasuk Zev Kois Pare Yad V'Gaimer. And then the Revi is so he's referencing the Yerushalmi, which talks about the cups of Pare, and maybe the 4th cup is Bechsamaza, but these are the cups of Pare, which is interesting because he doesn't bring down, which the classic way that we know about it is that it's the Dalakaisis correspond to the Vitzesi, Vitzalti, Glakli, which is the 4 languages of redemption. Rashi doesn't bring that down, but if you look at the next page, where in Avipsach, right when the Mishnah says that Lo Yivzchol Marba Koisis, so if you look at Rashi writes that everyone should drink 4 cups. Rashi writes, Kenega Baal L'Shen is Gula, which is Vitzesi, Vitzalti, Glakli, L'Kachti. So when the Mishnah introduces the 4 cups, Rashi brings down the reason of Vitzesi, Vitzalti, the four languages of redemption, which means that Rashi is saying that is the main reason. The main reason why we drink the 4 cups of wine correspond to these 4, these 4 progressive languages. And when the Gemara is talking about even women are obligated, so there you can't really say because women didn't even but didn't suffer as much as men in this time. So Rashi gives a different reason. This is the simple interpretation. But let's use this interpretation of Vitzeisi, that it's actually talking about these 4 languages of redemption. If we take it as that the 4 cups correspond to Vitzeisi, you would imagine, this simply thinking about this, that they actually are in progressive order, right? Vitzeisi means I'll take you out. Vitzalti will be, I'll save you. Galti, I'll redeem you. Lakachti, I'll take you, which is Mount Torah. So you would think that the 4 cups represent 4 stages of movement, going from the lower to the higher, right? Lower to the higher means you start off with Vitzeisi, then Vitzalti, and Galti, then Lakachti. Those are the 4 progressive stages. And this is the way a lot of the Rishonim learned this. And Abarbanel writes this very clearly on the Agada that there are actually stages that happen to Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim. That Vitzeisi is the 6 months before Pesach, which is a Rosh Hashanah, which is Batlu Shiva Mitzrayim. That's the first step. And then it was Batla Matzah, it's like the certain type of taxes. It's Alti, then Galti is that we left Mitzrayim, and Velakachti is Matan Torah. So there's a progression, right? And the progression is moving forward. Okay, I'm saying it correctly. The progression is moving upward. Exactly. It's moving upward. It's progressively moving forward. And this is partially the reason why it's 4 cups of wine. Why is it not 4 cups of milk or apple juice? Why is it 4 cups of wine? So again, in the Gemara, the reason why it's cups of wine is because the same reason why we make Kiddush on wine, because the Gemara says, Zecher al yayin, that you have to remember it through wine. And Rashi says, Ein Zecher el b'yayin. The Tosfos says, Ein Zecher el yayin. That is, Zecher, remembrance comes through wine. And the opinion of Tosfos in general is that the first cup of the Daled Kos is like Kiddush. Therefore, he says you don't have to give it. Not everyone has to drink it. But the point is that it represents, according to this understanding, because it represents Zechira. That's one way of understanding. The other way of understanding is that the reason why it's actually wine, if we're not saying that it's together in Kiddush, it's Kiddush, then it's Zecher al yayin. And Zecher Sitzias B'Zayin is also, so maybe it's some type of Kiddush. But if you just say that it's why is it wine, it's because wine is a liquid that you actually drink progressively, which means that it's compounded. If you drink 3 cups of water, it's not like now I have more water and like that. You drink 4 cups of wine, every cup of wine adds to the next one. So it's actually an upward movement. You drink 1 cup of wine, you feel a little bit, 2 cups of wine, a little more, 3 cups of wine, a little more, 4 cups of wine more. Right? So it's actually a progressive, compounded and progressive.
Okay? Why is the Shiur even on regular Shabbos only through wine?
That's a Gemara. That's a limit from a pasuk.
Right, but what's the?
Okay, that's another conversation. We're not going to talk about this. We're going to talk about wine now for the Daled Kos. But what is it about the 4 cups? It seems to be, and the truth is, if you just think about the Seder, just without actually knowing anything, you would think that that's the order of the cups. That the order of the cups of the wine is in a progressive state. Right? You're moving higher and higher and higher. Okay. Now, along comes, first in the Rishonim, and this is a very clear structure in terms of Rabbeinu B'chai, because that Rabbeinu B'chai writes that V'chein oy Daled Kos shel Pesach kinegdam, and he talks about the 4 cups. He says like this. That the first cup, it's on the left column. The first and the second side. The first cup corresponds to the Yud of the name of Hashem. There's 4 letters in the name of Hashem. Yud, K, Vav, K. So the first letter corresponds. The first cup is Kodesh, which represents holy. Sacred is Kodesh, is the first cup. That's where the Makis come from, which is the upper hay. Which is Bina, whatever, but that's the idea of the second cup. The third cup is Keneged Vav, and the fourth cup is Keneged Shoy Chavos Keneged Hey Achronim Midas Adin, the midah of attribute of din, of judgment. So you start, the starting point of the four cups is actually from higher to lower. Now you would think it would go from Hey to Vav to Hey to Yud, right? Because if it's progressing, you would start from the lower and get to the higher. But here Rabbi Mechaya says that it actually works in reverse, which means the first cup is Yud, is Chachma, the second cup is Bina, third cup is the Midas, and the fourth cup is Malchus, which goes Yud K, Vav K. Higher to lower. This is the way it's structured. And this concept of going from higher to lower is actually the way the Ari HaKadosh also writes it. The way that Ari rewrites is like this. We'll just read a few pieces of it from AriZal. In Shar Chagamatz's B'Yetz Chaim, it says, Hinu Kois Aleph, it's on the left column. Kois Aleph Yichav L'Kav Yamin, Shu Moyach HaChoch V'D'Ima. So in general, the idea of the four cups is to draw down moichin of ima. In very, very simple language, this would mean that there is moichin of Abba and moichin of Ima. Okay, this is very simple. Okay, so moichin of Ima means the difference between matzah and wine. And matzah represents, bola matzah yatza, right? If you just swallow the matzah yatza, you don't have to taste the matzah. Matzah is actually very bland. It doesn't have a bland taste, which means it's not textured, it's not flavorful. It's the opposite. It shouldn't have text. Wine, drinking wine on Pesach specifically, is something that has to have a lot of taste, even a lot of color. The best is actually to even drink red wine for many different reasons they're trying to bring down. Yankee Siadim, that this idea of definitely drinking red, which means that it has to be embodied. So it's the difference between two types of intelligence. We'll say there's two types of clarity, okay? Because moichin means clarity, and we talked a lot of times, right? This idea of drawing down clarity means that you're in a state of exile, some type of constriction, and you need some type of clarity that will allow you to see things in a different way. So there's a type of clarity that's very rich and textured. It's a textured clarity. It's almost like you have a visceral sensation of how things have to look. There's a feeling. Okay, maybe we'll say it this way. There's a feeling that you have. I feel this is the right thing for me to do. Okay, I know feelings is a whole complicated thing, but I have this sensation that I know what to do. And then there's, we were talking last week, right? So that's then there's a moichin, which is moichin Abba. Moichin Abba means a clarity of pure intelligence. It's you're just clear in your head what has to be done. Some type of transparency in the head that's clear. So that's the difference between moichin Abba and moichin Abba. That's
more embodied.
It's more embodied. Yeah, it's more embodied.
Less emotional.
Less emotional, exactly. Less about it, more emotional, more texture, less texture. So there's two types of clarity. Sometimes you say, I really get this real good hunch, feeling, whatever. I know. With that's going to be moichin to ima if it's a correct one. And moichin to Abba is it's very detached. I'm not invested into the result, but it's very clear to me what has to be done. Okay, that's like a moichin to Abba. Yeah, but it's klar. It's clean. It's clean. It's very clean. It's klar. So the cups of wine represents different levels in the moich d'ima. Okay, so there's chachma moich d'ima, and there's bina moich d'ima, and then there's the 6 spheres in moich d'ima, and then there's the malchus in moich d'ima. Right, so it represents these 4 things. So the Daris says that the kois aleph yichav al kav yamin shul moich chachma d'ima shenichas boy v'hu nichas zishin. And the first thing that we do on the Seder night is that there is a drawing down of the level of the clarity of the moichin, the ima of Chachma. Right? Chachma within ima, which means that you're starting off with the highest. Right? You're starting with the highest. And if you look at the next column,
What does it mean?
Zar Ampin means you. You're Tferes, you're the Malchus, you're the person. It means you. You're drawing that into you. This is what in a microcosm you're drawing it on a cosmic level, but the ikir is actually you're drawing it to you. having through the matzah, through the milchadim nusa, there's something like this idea that the matzah is going to bring clarity. The matzah is going to bring.
The fact that with the Oris of the Ima is coming down before the Oris of the Abba,
Yeah.
this is
Okay, wait a second. So wait, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about 1 second. Yeah. Okay, if you look at the next column, he also says, "V'ini dala kois shel lo Pesach." This is in the Shar Kavanas. Who can get gimel lekim v'miloyim? Because kois is gematria. The word kois, cup, is 86, which represents elikim, and elikim. The hey of elikim could be spelled in different ways, like always, right? Hey could be spelled hey yud. It could be spelled hey hey. It could be spelled hey aleph, right? These are the 3 ways. So he says that the first cup corresponds to elikim the yudin, which means elikim where the hey is connected to the letter yud, which is moyach the chachma, which is the intelligence of wisdom. That's why kiddush represents sacred, represents chachma. That's the first cup. So that's the elikim. You're breaking up the constrictions of elikim, which are connected to the moyach of chachma. Avima. Then the second cup is elikim dehin, the elikim that's on the level of hey, which is bina. Okay, so that's Yitzis Mitzrayim, Shar Binyas Mitzrayim, Tzibur Atzim Bina, say that garden, this is all things that you're speaking, you're expressing. This is a higher level of hay. And the Kois Gimel Vadalid is Keneg Chasad and Mikvur, so Shnei Elikim B'Muloy Alpha. That's the Elikim, Aleph Yud Mem, where the hay is filled out with the letter Aleph, and that itself is two madregas, 2 separate stages. So therefore, one will be Chesed, one will be Gvura, and therefore, because they're both Chesed and Gvura in Das, which means that das itself is the place of the choice, and in the place of the choice, we've said this a few times. In the place of the choice, you have 2 choices only. You can either do it or not do it, right? Either express or not express. The das of Chesed means to do. The das of Bina says not. The das of Gvura says don't do. So it's das itself that's divided into 2. That's why there are 3 parts of the brain, but there's actually 4 parts of the brain. Which is, there's four levels of moichin. It's like you have in the head film, you have 3 or 4, which means it's chachma bina das. Das chesed, das gevura. Because das is a mafteach, is a key that opens up the emotions. And how does it open emotions? Either it chooses to act or not to act. That's the level of das, right? That's the place of Avdalim and Ein. That's the place where you make decisions. So that's why he says you shouldn't drink between the 3rd and 4th cup, because they're both connected to the moichin avima of das. So therefore, because they're connected to das, don't drink. Again, but the structure is, again, moving this way, moving from top down, okay, versus from bottom up, right? You're starting from chachma, from the highest, then you're drawing it down into bina, then you're drawing it down into das, and das chesed, das gvura, so you're drawing it down. This is like going from up to down.
But they're all ima.
It's only nima, yeah, it's only within nima. Okay, now the question is like this. What?
Why? Why is
Okay,
the emotional component?
Okay, well, why is
The
wine?
emotional component is
Is wine?
or always?
No, this analogy. Yeah, the matzah will be the chachma, the chachma, and wine will be the moichin the bina.
Is it even a way of being makabel?
No, it's even in a way that it's mispashet. Things are like, it's like the father gives the seed and the mother is mispashet that thing. So it's actually the elaboration, the fullness of the idea. The structure becomes much larger. So this is one thing. So either goes up or goes down. Okay, that's the 2 things that I have to understand. Okay, so now we're going to talk exactly what you're asking, because not everyone knows what you're talking about. So now we're going to read one shtickle shar kavanos, and we're going to understand these things. Because Aleph, in the first cup, what's your intention? To chav al kav yamin, have intention for the right column. Shua moyach hachachma shebezah mitzad ima bulvad. Okay, that's the moyach. We just said it, right? Moyach hachma shebezah. Okay. There's the kav zadichlas zishul kulam. It's a repeat what he said before, because that's therefore you say kaddish, it's holy, sacred. The yud, that's what you're drawing down. So then he asks a question. Aleph the moichin zed the chachma. Achar gadlus aleph. Achar katnus beis. Achar gadlus beis. Okay, what does he mean like this? Like, it's very, very simple. There's something that's called katnus and gadlus. Okay, in very, very simple language, it's immaturity maturity. Which means in the normal course of the way things are developed is that first you experience an immature state, and then you grow into a state of maturity, right? That's the natural course of things. It's Vayi Erev, then Vayi Boiker. Vayi Erev is the katnas, right? The constriction, the smallness, and then it lights up, and you become clarity. So the normal structure is katnas to gadol. It's like a person, a child, is born as a kat, and becomes a gadol. That's the movement from immaturity to maturity. So technically, if the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim is the story of a level of maturity, which means we left Mitzrayim, we left the constrictions of Mitzrayim, what they represent, what should really happen is, if someone said, okay, you make the structure of the Haggadah, what we would do is, before we start making Kiddush, the first thing that you would do is you would ask the questions, right? Questions is katmas. You would ask questions. I don't know how you would do this technically, but I would eat the maror, which is katmas. I would karpas. I would do all the katmas things, and then I would make kiddush and say kaddish li kol b'chor. Kaddish li. It's kodesh. It's holy. It's sacred. And now you would be maschal b'gnus. I would start everything that way. I would do the whole katmas before the seder, or do things that are represented in katmas, and then move to gadol. But the structure of the whole Seder is actually a very inverse structure, because you start off immediately with Gadlus. The first step of Kaddish, according to the Ari, is actually drawing down Moichen the Ima of Chachma, which means I'm starting from a place that I'm actually a Gadol, I'm mature. So how did you get to a place of maturity when you were immature? You just complained 10 minutes ago or 5 hours ago that you still have chametz, and you still have ego, and you still need to burn the chametz away and do bittul chametz, right? You still have to refrain from these things, which means I'm still in an immature state. Spiritually, I'm in an immature state. Comes along a Kiddush, I write a big Kiddush, I say, I'm Rav Asher, all of a sudden I'm already holy, I'm divine, I'm perfect. What happened with all that work, right? You should introduce that this way. So the Ari's answer to this is, it's really a medrash, but the Ari uses it in a very Kabbalistic structured way. But the medrash basically says is that Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Malachim were complaining by Kriyas Yamsuf, is halal avodah zara, halal avodah zara. These were idol worshippers. Which means that these people were gifted a state of godless which is way beyond their capacity. They didn't work on it. Or in the other image, which is very, very popular, said in the name of the AriZal, but actually not found anywhere in the Torah Sari, which is that B'shas Yetzias Mitzrayim, when the Jews left Egypt, there were 49 levels in Tumah, right? This is famous in the name of the Ari, and that they were in the levels of Tumah, and then Hashem pulled them out from the 49th level of Tumah and brought them to the highest Madrega, which means that we were stuck in a very strong level of katnus, or immaturity. We spoke about this once, that the Leshem says they were actually the 49th level, but it's not relevant. The point is that there was some type of immaturity, whether they swung very high or low, also it's still an immature state. They were certainly in an immature state, right? They going to the whole process of going through the midbar is that they're so uman is a yonek. We're actually like a level of unika. We're actually a level like a suckling, like a child that's becoming mature, right? That's the ibur unika moichin. That's the 3 stages in pregnancy. Then you become a unika, your yonek from your mother. And then you become moichin, then you have intelligence, which is actually a process of development. Over here, the whole Yetzias Mitzrayim is immediate. Hashem takes us out of Mitzrayim, and one day we're like this, the next day we're like, already on the highest level, ready to leave Mitzrayim. Right? So what's Pshat? Pshat is that what the Medrash is saying is that sometimes, in order to get a person to a state, that if a person is so tithering on the state where they're so stuck in their own personal Mitzrayim, whatever the Mitzrayim is, whatever their constrictions are, and they're mamish on the last rung, that if they go any further, they're going to get stuck for life, kaviyachol. The only solution you have is to pick up this person and lift them to the highest level, and then once they're lifted to the highest level, when then they realize the potential of who they could become, then they can actually go back to Katnus and say, okay, now that I know that I'm on top of the mountain, let me go back on the mountain and claim it. So that's why the immediate thing that you do after Kaddish is actually Karpas. Is Rachza, Karpas. You do all these things that represent, and then the questions, and you go about Mayinu, because now you're revisiting Katnas. You understand? You can't start with Katna. You can't start with smallness, because if you start immediately with smallness, you're just going to be parking in smallness. You're just never going to get out of this. You're going to be stuck in the smallness state. So there's like a lifting up. There's Yitzis Mitzrayim is Pasach Hashem. Pasach Hashem means that Hashem skipped over all the madregas, all the levels, and Hashem says, okay, you're here. I'm lifting you up to this highest level, and here you're going to be starting from Kaddish. And that's he says different fisha katnas alchav who din gomer and lahash b'zacham. He says you can't deal with that katnas aleph. So you'll have to go gadlus aleph, which is the first gadlus, which is gadlus aleph is moichin of ima. You're going to go through katnas beis, which is the immaturity of the next stage, to get you to the gadlus beis, which is when you eat the matzah. Okay, that's going to be the chachma. So you go from the bina to chachma, but you're going to start off right away on the top. So this is the general structure, that it's moving from high. You start off on the highest level, and then it descends into the lower levels.
Is that on the level of a matana?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking. Pasach Hashem, it's a matana. That's Pesach. Pesach is there's oil of us avoiding chametz. This is the din. We talk a prepare and everything, but that's not the din. The din is like you read the Mishnah. Oil of us avoiding chametz. That's it. You start off the day before you eat chametz. Oil of us avoiding chametz.
So the concept is like a concept of katzah with berusa.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't the conversation be in Abba? So high madrega.
No, because Why wouldn't it be this? Because
or is it that Abba is going to come later to push away the demon
of the katnas base?
Godless.
No, listen. It's
Highest has to go to the highest.
no, just something. Yeah, you have to get exactly. Let's say talk about really tachlis. You take a person that's really stuck. You just need to get him to a place that he can realize he's so much better. You have to put him to the highest possible place.
You just got to get this car started.
You got to get the start exactly. You got to get jump started. This is the limit.
Thinking about it, if you're starting by the yud, so really, if you look at it, yud, then hey, then vav, then hey.
Yeah.
Really, you can look at the hey, the vav, and the hey can be interchangeable.
Right.
You can start at the highest, then go to the lowest. Hey vav hey is really the same as hey vav hey.
Yeah, that's good. It's a good point. Okay. So this is one structure. I guess I'm just trying to give you two structures, then to understand a little what this oimik of is, and to really bring it down. It's brought on also. It's brought on also in the Gra, and here the Symposium actually brings it down also. Same idea that the four kaisis represent Olam Hazeh, this world, Yemaisa Mashiach, times of Mashiach, Tchias HaMesim, the third cup, Olam Haba, the fourth cup. Moving upwards. Okay, moving upwards. Here the Symposium also brings it down that it's Achaisi, Ariyasi, Yanasi, Tamasi. The same idea. Achaisi, Ariyasi, Yanasi, Tamasi. Tamasi means like I'm mamash one, you're my twin, which means that it's a higher level of yichud. So you're going up. In the second, the last few lines over there, he just brings out a lot of different fours of this thing. Okay, so let's go back first to this to the Yitzhak itself, to the Galti. These four Lashonos. But before we get to this, let's try to understand a little bit this question, whether it's going up or it's going down. So, okay, you see like there's two models, but sometimes you have to ask yourself like a very simple question. Okay, the AriZal, and it's talking on a very high level, and they're being b'chai. But if you actually ask a regular person how they experience in the Seder, you would imagine that the Seder is progressive. Like that's we'd say it's all okay. The Ari, when he talks about Shulchan Aruch, he says something very interesting. He says that Shulchan Aruch, which is a meal, okay, that it's different, the meal that you eat on Pesach, the meal that you eat throughout the year, because now what it is, it's that there's a revealing of all the spirit. It's like it's the It's the revealing of everything that you experience in b'pnimius, an internal level, through speech, through machshava, now is being projected now into the world of Matzah. It means somehow the meal itself becomes an embodied expression of the Haggadah. So there's the Haggadah, when you're speaking the Haggadah, there's a Haggadah which you do with your thought and your speech. And then there's the Haggadah that you do actually with your Matzah, with your action. That the eating itself is an expression of the chitzonius, the external expression of the internal thing that is going on. Okay, I'll give you another mashal. This is actually from the Nitziv. The Nitziv writes that Hallel on Pesach night is actually divided in two, right? Because he's talking about Yitzis Mitzrayim, then he talks about Lasalami. So it's divided into two. Normally, when you say Hallel, you're not allowed to make a hefsek, right? Well, if it's a din in Shiur or whatever, it's not negeo exactly what the Hallel on Pesach night is. If it's a din in Kriya, din in Shiur, it's like the whole lumdus with your around and like the whole thing. But if we just say that the idea of the Hallel is that you're saying half now and half before, what actually happens, according to what the Nitziv is trying to give some type of language to this, is you're saying that there's a Hallel that you speak words of praise in words, and then there's the Hallel that you actually eat, which means that the food, the meal, is occurring within the Hallel. It's not like you're saying first part of Hallel now, second part of Hallel now. You're actually saying Hallel. But this type of Hallel on Pesach night is a very unique type of Hallel, where part of Hallel is to sing Hashem's praise through eating. Okay, so sometimes you sing Hashem's praise through thanking and through speaking words. Here, the Hillel actually comes through the process of eating, which is really what the Ari is writing, but in a more like a lumdish or some type of structure of a lumdish way. So, which means is like this. There's an upward movement and there's a downward movement, but the upward movement and the downward movement are actually talking about the same thing in just a different language. Which means that up means more inclusive, whereas down means the same thing. In other words, normally when you think about up means I'm here. This is very graphically. If I'm here, and up means if I'm flying upwards, right? It would mean that I'm shedding less. I'm shedding more and more of myself, and I'm becoming less in order to get higher. And the less I become, the higher I get. That's what normally you think about. Let's say when we think about Vegas or something. So the more I let go of, the more I'm stuck with all these packages and all these luggage. The more I let go of, the higher I can fly. So up makes you smaller, right? So you start off this way and actually you get pointed and you become smaller. In the Seder, we say that it's the opposite direction. The Seder is you start off narrow, but you're actually becoming more inclusive. So the more inclusivity, which means that your eating becomes holy, is that an upward movement or a downward movement? In the language, the way that rephrases it is that it's actually down. You started from a yud, then you come to the hey, then you come to the vav, and you're only going, and it's being more mispashet. But that actually means the same thing, because if you're looking at it, let's say there's Olam Haza, and then Yom Mashiach, and then Tchias HaMesim, you're getting more inclusive. Like more of life is included. So the more is actually up, but also paradoxically from one structure, it looks like it's actually down. Understand? So it's actually going like this. And then from this perspective, it's going like this. But either way, what you're trying to say is that there's an oirach and there's a reichev. There's the movement up and the movement wide. Okay? The movement up is the movement wider. Wider seems to be going down because you're becoming more inclusive, but it's actually a different way of just phrasing the same thing. You're following? That's what the Seder is doing. I just want to give you the structure a little bit, and then try to understand this a little bit, how this works in terms of the 4 cups, in sort of simple language. So you have these dalikoises, and these 4 cups, we say it's basically said already in the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi is saying that it corresponds to the four gulas, so it represents these 4 redemption. These four. So you have the Babylonian, Bavel, Babylonians, Madai, Persian, and Yavan, and Rome. So you have these four. What are these four? What do they represent these four? And what does it mean to actually? Because if you see us Mitzrayim, if they're going out of Mitzrayim on the night of Pesach, means that we're gifted the ability to get out of these constrictions. What are these constrictions? What do they actually represent? So the Maharal in Gvuras Hashem says that these four things, Vitzeisi, Vitzalti, Galti, Lakachti. It's a long Maharal. If you know the Maharal, Ram talks very at great length. But the Maharal basically says that these four things represents the guf, the nefesh, the guf, the seichel, and the hakoil, the everything. So there's the body, the spirit, the body, the mind, and we'll say existential. It's what is it? It's everything. All types of exile. First, let's pull it out into the big picture. There are basically four stories that happen to Klal Yisrael. These are the enemies of Klal Yisrael. They represent the constriction, the gullus of Klal Yisrael. There are four big stories. The first story is the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Destruction of the Beis Hamikdash was a destruction of the nefesh of Klal Yisrael. The spirit of Klal Yisrael was crushed because we believed it would be the Eretz Yisrael. This is their homeland. This is going to be their eternity. And eventually Mashiach will come. That was the plan. The plan was to be there. That's it. There was no plan of Galus. That was not part of the agenda. With the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, the first Beis Hamikdash, that was the nefesh of Klal Yisrael was broken. The second story, which is the story of Madai, the story of Purim, the Persian story, we know that's the guf, right? Hashem wants to kill the body of the Jew. This represents the guf, the body. The next story is Seichel, the intelligence, which is the whole argument between the Yavonim and the Misyavonim. The whole argument is about the Hellenization of the ancient world, which the Jews were fighting very strongly against. And so that was an affront to the intellect, to the gullus of Yavan. Rome, historically, I don't know if you know this, but Rome was basically, there was no Roman great philosophers. There were maybe some semi-philosophers. The Rome was good in his history, and the Romans are basically a collective. Basically, they're good tweakers. They took from everybody and they tweaked it and they made something into it. That's really what Western civilization is. It's not like its own identity. It's it's a hashpash from a lot of different things. So that represents the hakol. That represents the everything. By the way, if you ever, the dreidel has Nun Gimel Heshin, which is nefesh guf seichel hakol, right? If you just look at the dreidel. So these are the four types of golus. This represents on a very high madrega, and then also represents on a very, a macro picture, also on a micro picture. That there are four types of internal things that hold us back. What we'll call our own personal golias, our own personal restrictions, our own personal exiles. There's the golus, there's a restriction of the body, which means, in a very simple language, it means, I would like to do this. Really, I understand it's the right thing for me to do, and even, I feel good about doing it, but it's behind the loss. I can't. I'm too tired. It's too early in the morning. What I'm going to get up to learn, it's just not possible. My body, I have limitations in my body. And I'm a physical person, and I have to live in this, and there's certain limitations that don't allow me to do this, and I can't physically do it. Okay, that's the first excuse of life. The next excuse is the nefesh. The spirit of the person is the person's mood. I think it's a great idea, but it's not the mood. I'm not feeling it now. I'm not in the right place. Whatever. There's a lot of different excuses. But I know it should be done. Yes, it makes sense. Yeah, but I don't have the nafshistik, the soul quality to go ahead and do this. This is the nefesh level. The seichel level is, the intelligent level is, I just don't have the capacity, the mind capacity to really do this. I really should be learning something, but it's not for me. These are for people that are much smarter than me. Whatever it is, there's the limitation that you place on yourself with the level of seichel. And then there's the general combination of everything. It's I'm not so in the mood. I'm a little bit tired. It's beyond me. I can't do it. Okay, that's a hakol type of cover out, which is like a sort of type of apathy, sort of type of like, a general apathy towards anything.
Before you said existential.
Right, existential.
What am I like?
Yeah, existential, but it usually comes with apathy and depression and nihilism. So yeah, exactly, something like that.
Didn't we say last week though, if you had like multiple reasons of why you're doing something or whatever, that's like real.
Yeah, so that's one. So Rome Staka is the Medrash says it's the Maral brings down that it's a umash ein loshen. It's like the Maral talks very strongly about Rome. Says it's nothing really. That's because of that, because it's everything. But we're talking about in the Nefesh Adam. Let's try to understand this. If you can superimpose this now in terms of actually what we're doing by the Seder, because there's some type of process that we're trying to reach. That the process of the Seder is that there is going to be this structure, this mega structure of 4, and the 4 is going to be, we say it's progressive and more inclusive, so it's moving upwards, downwards, and further. But it also represents like I'm actually moving, I'm actually doing something. So the first kois, the first cup that a person does, corresponds to the guf, the body. The second cup that a person does corresponds to the nefesh. The third cup that a person drinks corresponds to his seichel. And the fourth cup corresponds to the hakol, which represents the Rome, the exile of Rome. How does this actually work? So not just this, okay, so we're just pushing these 4 things on these 4 things, and okay, go figure it out. But there's actually, the Maharal goes into whole arichas exactly how it's connected to the Vitzeisi, Vitzalti, Galti, Lakachti. But we'll talk about this in terms of actually the 4 cups. Because what are you actually doing at the 4 cups is very relevant to understand what we're actually trying to achieve on the level that there's some type of freedom. The first step, which is the first cup, the constitution that you're going to take, it's breaking the klipa, the negativity, the restriction of the guf. Because what you're actually doing, very simply, is you're telling shlut. You're showing up. You're saying, I had a hard day. There's a lot of things that are Pesach to be done, and whatever. Life is all chaos, and everything I'm putting aside, I'm stepping up to the plate. I'm stepping up. I'm picking up the cup, and I'm ready to do it. So that readiness, the physical readiness to say that I'm actually going to do the Seder, I'm going to do this with the right intention, I'm going to be present here, I'm actually going to show up, that in itself somewhat breaks the klipa of the body. Which if you translate that, not on the Seder night, is let's say a person says, I'm tired, just show up. Just like to counter the laziness is showing up. To counter it. So in other words, if you feel lazy, I'm going to counter the laziness. Even despite the fact that I'm tired, I'm going to show up, right? So it's the opposite of that. So the opposite of being on the level of the guf that of the body, which I can do it, I'm going to say that I could do. That's the guf. That's the first cup. The second cup is the nefesh, because nafshi yotze b'davri. What are we actually doing in Magid? Magid is all about speech. To arouse your emotions, to speak about the Yetzias Mitzrayim, to speak that even though we're constricted, Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, right? We're talking about the redemption. We're talking about, and that's Vigad L'Bincha. You're talking to the child. The child is full of wonder and questions, which means that you're mefatech. You're opening up the part of yourself which is closed, which is your emotional self, the part of the nefesh of this being, not in the mood, all of a sudden becomes in the mood. It's like if you're not feeling, let's say, in a good place, if your child shows up and is very happy, you're going to start feeling in a good place. There's something just about the affection and being affected by children. Just being in the presence of people that are more emotional will open you up. So that's the second step. So you're speaking about the emotions to open up your emotions. Like that magid is from Chazal say that the word magid comes from the word shamoshchem esalev. It's like something that's drawing out the heart. That magid means that you're drawing out your heart. You're revealing your feelings. Okay, that's the cup that represents magid. The third cup, which is the cup that you do all the mitzvahs on, basically, which is all you do matzah, you do all the cup, everything you didn't come back to the second cup, which is all the ma'aseh mitzvahs, is the kavana place. So there's some level of like saying, I'm going to think about what I'm doing. Like I'm not just going to even though Baal Matzah Yatsa, but I'm saying I'm going to have some type of kavanah in order to perform this properly. So I'm countering and saying, even though I'm just showing up and thinking about it. And the fourth one, which is the fourth cup, is hollow, because to counter apathy is to be grateful. Why do people become very apathetic and very lackadaisical? Because they feel like, okay, whatever, nothing's really happening. But when a person is able to thank Hashem, and actually the Pele Yoetz says that on the night of Hallel, it's not just say Hallel for things of the past, but even speak about your own things in your life that you're being grateful for, to counter this lack of openness that you're not feeling, to counter the klipa, which is actually, by the way, very relevant in terms of how we look at the world today. The reason why people are very apathetic and people don't really care, because they're not grateful. Everyone thinks that everything should just happen. And the moment the world is a little bit shaky, then all of a sudden people say, oh, thank you, Hashem, for giving me a good life. Mazel tov. So the idea of being grateful is to counter that idea of the apathy. So these are the four. Now what's important to understand is like this. That four, by definition, is within the structure of a duality. Which means, what is four? Four means I am feeling this way, so I'm countering that feeling that way. That's a very a temporary solution to our problem. Because, let's say a person overeats. So they say, because I'm overeating, I'm going to fast. That's not really going to help. That's the opposite of eating. But you're not really getting to the root of the issue. If you're saying, I have a problem that I'm lazy. Okay, so I'm going to show up, but I'm still lazy. In other words, what you're really doing when you're dealing with this opposite, it's only creating a temporary solution. Therefore, if you have a question and you have a teretz, okay, so tomorrow you'll have a bigger question, and that will undo the teretz. If we're trying to achieve a level of freedom, and the promise of the Seder is that we're going to achieve some level of redemption, of real inner freedom, it can't be in the world of opposites. Because in the world of opposites, it's only a temporary solution. Let's say a person says, I have a boy in the Shaila, it's terribly bothering me. And someone says, okay, I'll give you an answer. Okay, fine. So you feel relaxed for the next day. You think about his answer for the next day, and then you come up with a higher question. Right? The Baal Shem Tov says, for every question you can have an answer, for every answer you can have a question. That's the nature of a duality. Duality is, if there's one and there's a counter to that, you never actually get out of this vicious cycle. So this is why, on the Oimek, the Seder appears to be on the level of four, the structure of four, but really, in the deepest level, is actually a structure of five. For everything that you have four, you actually have a hidden fifth. So, for example, this is talking about the cups of wine, the Dalek Koises. So there's the Dalek Koises. And then there's the Koisa Chamishi. But the Koisa Chamishi is actually a mysterious cup. It's so mysterious that there's two Girsois in the Gemara. In the Girs of the Rashbam, there is no Koisa Chamishi. In the Girs of the Rambam, there is a Koisa Chamishi. Because the Koisa Chamishi is what is alluded to. You drink the cup, you don't drink the cup. Is it Koisa Shaliyo? Is it Koisa for Mashiach? We're not really sure. That is the Koisa Chamishi. So there's a mysterious cup that we actually fill to say that even though we're talking about the four, we're actually alluding to something that's actually five. And that's why there's five of the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Lezer, that are sitting in Bnei Brak. And Rabbi Akiva says that Kol Makas Shemaka Hiva Kodesh Baruch Hu Shechamish Makas, which means it has five Makas, which means hidden in, if you know how to read the story of the Seder well, you'll see that there's always a hidden fifth. Like even, let's say that there's four questions, right? Okay, we know there are four questions, but there's actually a really fifth question that was taken out, right? In the times of the Mishnah, there was a question of the tzli, right? But then the tzli question disappeared, went into hiding, and the question of fifth would become misubim, which is why to recline or don't recline. That was not an original question in the Gemara, in the Mishnah. So there's a four, but there's a hidden fifth. You know, the Lubavitcher once said that there's actually a fifth child. The fifth child doesn't come to the Seder because he doesn't even know he's Jewish. But that actually can be seen as something that's negative, or you actually see something that's actually positive. He doesn't show up to the Seder because he's beyond the Seder. Because Seder, order, structure, by definition, is the opposite of freedom. Because if I say 1 plus 1 is 2, which is an orderly structure, I can't break free from it. If I'm in a structure, if I'm in a Seder, If I'm in a structure of order, I can never break free because I need to be beyond the order to create the order. That's freedom. Freedom means I'm standing outside the system and I'm choosing how to be. But if I'm in the system of order, which is 1 + 1 is 2, and a question and answer, then I'm actually stuck into this duality, which doesn't allow me for freedom. So the only way I can actually achieve freedom, we have to understand what type of freedom this is, but the only way to achieve this freedom is actually to get to the Madregas HaChamishi, to get to the 5th level. That's why you have Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya. You have the 4 levels of the soul, right? But then you have the 5th level, which is Yechidah. Right? You have Pshat, Remez, Drush, Soid. You have the 4 levels, Pshat, Remez, Drush, Soid. But then you have the Razin, or Soid and Neshama, Neshama and Neshama. There's a 5th, there's the hidden 5th level. There's always hidden. There's Yud K Vav K, the 4 letters of Yud K Vav K, and then there's the Koitzel Yud, which is like the little tweak on top of the Yud. So whenever you say there are 4 levels, Atzilus, Bri, Yitzia, Asiyah, there's 4 levels of the world, correct? But there's also Adam Kadmon. You understand? So there's always a structure that's the 5th. What is this 5th level? So here's what the Maharal has to say about this, and then we'll understand how this is related to us. So let's see what the Maharal has to say very quickly. In Gvuras Hashem. On the left column, כי הריבו שבו על אוהים, הריבו הוא מסאחד גם כן. כי אין הריבו מחולק, רק ריבו מסאחד, וריבו שהוא מסאחד הוא 5. כי ה5 מאחד es הבא של הריבוי. This is what he's saying. You don't get it? On the left side, the left column.
No, what is he saying?
Oh, he's saying like this. He's saying there is a world of a duality, which is the Dalet, the 4. And then there's the point, the Nekuda Chamishi, the point of Chamishi, which in the point of Chamishi is a Ribuy HaMesachet. It's the unity, it's the point that unifies all the parts. It's not so clear what he's going to say, but that's okay. The next page is actually Ner Mitzvah is actually the same thing about the Dal Madregas, and about the 5th one. The next page is also about the Bnei Yissaschar. You'll see it has on Chanukah has a whole thing about the he goes Barichas. But I want to go over here to this shtickle. This is from the Rebbe also. I was explaining the idea of Chassidus. What is Chassidus? So if you look at Bays, it's the last page, okay, and then we'll try to unpack it to understand exactly how this is relevant to the 4 cups. And the Nekuda Atzma Shel Chassidus, the Nekuda, the essence of Chassidus is, which is based on the teaching of the Rebbe Rashab, is Amshachas Or Chodesh B'chinas Pnimis HaKeser, is a drawing down from the level of the inner quality of Keser. This is like the highest level of Ein Sof that's in the Madrega of Radla. Turn to the next page. Just want to the next page, which is the 5 levels of Nefesh Neshama Chaya Yechidah, the 5 levels of the soul. But look at the first paragraph. Dal B'chinas Nefesh Chaya Madregas Pratius. Nefesh Neshama Chaya are all specific madregas. There's a nefesh level, there's a ruach level, there's a neshama level, there's a chai level. Okay, these are specific ones. Bechinas Yechidah etzam neshama. Bechinas Yechidah is the essence of the soul, which is l'mayla megeder apotim, which is beyond definitions of details. But nimshachas dal bechinas v'imyosi asher bechinas Yechidah etzam neshama nimshachas dal bechinas naram. But from that point, the nefesh ruach and neshama flow from. Ki Lashon Yechidah Yomar al Achdus Pshuta Shel Shalos Beis V'Shnach Pratik Im Geder Bakan Pratik Im Mechishon Kuda Atzmis on Neshama Al Shemon is a Dal Bechinas on Neshama. Okay, I don't know if you understand what this means, but I'll explain.
It's not a call. It's not an
It's not a cloud that has the pratim in its detail. Let me.
It's beyond.
No, it's actually more than that. We'll say it like this. Now, let's try to understand this. Understand what's the oimik of the 5th level. You can normally say like this, that there is, we say this, in the world of the opposites, right, of this duality, there's one and there's another. There's one and another. And then you say that there's a point that holds those 4 together. Okay? But there's one is a place of pratim, of details, of structure, of particularity, and one is the nakuda, the inside point that's holding these pratim together, these details, allowing it to exist in that space. This is actually it's not even a Kabbalistic idea. It's actually one of the reasons why the Kabbalah talk about 10 spheres, not besides the fact that there's 10 spheres. One of the reasons that it's explained what the 10 spheres, it has to do with oimek, with 3 dimensions of oirach, oimek, and reichev. Everything has right, left, middle, but like width, breadth, and height. Everything has that. In the oimek, reichev, and oirach, there is each one has oimek and reichev, which is 9. And what's the madrega? The 10. The 10 is what holds those 9 together. Yeah. By the way, this is an Aristotelian idea, but the Kabbalah adapted it to understand this, or he took it to forget. But this is the universal idea, which means there's some level where the one is the space that holds the other. But there's 2 ways how to think about it. There's one way to think about it is that there's a let's say there's 4 different spaces, right? And then there's the nakuda that's in contrast to these 4, which are separate from each other. There's one nakuda that are holding these 4 together. But then this nakuda, this point, is actually in contrast to that. Because whereas this is a prat, this is a klal. Right? This is a detail, this is a principle. But then that's not it. The level of Yechidah is the level that includes all 4. So what it does is, if you can use a fancy word, it's not exclusive transcendence, it's inclusive transcendence. Okay? Because normally when you think about transcendence, it's exclusive. It's transcendent of. The highest level of Yechidah is inclusive transcendence. It's a transcendence that actually includes everything, which is what we talked about before a little bit, right? About the meal that you're having on Pesach night. Which is that's the madrega of Yechidah. Let's understand this, what this means in Oimik. If Yechidah is a contrast, let's say a person is struggling with the guf, right? And it's the body. The body is like, I just can't get up. I'm tired. And then they contrast that and say, no, I'm going to push myself, right? That's the counter it. And then there's another way of saying it is like, I'm not tired. Like if you say the nakuda is the place that I'm not tired, but I'm not tired is in contrast to I am tired. So maybe I can tap into this place where I'm not tired, but I may just flip back into the place that I am tired. So it's still part of the structure. You're following? That's still not going to help me out of this wheel. If I'm tired, let's try this out. I'm tired. That's one structure. I'm pushing myself. That's the counter structure. And then the 5th structure could be saying, I'm not tired, which is the exclusion of that tiredness. You're following this model? 3 models, right? One is I'm tired. One is the tired, which is the klipa of the guf. Okay, that's the gullus of the guf. To counter the gullus of the guf, which says kaddish, the first step. Okay, kaddish means I'm showing up. I'm present. Present means I'm not going to be tired. I'm showing up. I'm actually pushing myself to be, even though I'm tired, I'm pushing myself. So it's contrary to that. That's the second paradigm. Then I said, but there's another paradigm, which is like something that's beyond that, transcendent of tiredness, which is I'm not tired. When I say that I'm not tired, in itself is saying it's contrary to that I am tired. So even though I'm not pushing myself, but it still didn't help, it's still in contrast. So therefore, I actually don't achieve anything by attaching myself to that consciousness, to that awareness. You're following? What I actually need to attain, and this is what the Maral is saying, and this is like the depth of what this idea is that the Nakuda of the 5th, which is what this is contrast to the Greeks, right? This is why we're saying, this is the Oimik, it's Yechidah. We're about Yechidah. Bevur leslem, like that madrega doesn't exist outside of Torah. This madrega of the 5th level, Yechidah. Because Yechidah is saying is that there's such a high level that it's so high that it includes every single low. You're following? That it's not so high that it excludes the low. It's so high that it actually includes also the low. Which means, okay, let's get to the words.
Marshall being tired. You were almost there.
I don't know. Okay, so Marshall is tired. Okay.
Darkness is a form of light.
Wait a second. No, wait a second. Yeah, I'm almost there. I can't say I'm there, but I'm almost there. That the idea is, we want to get to on Pesach night, Okay, this is the kavanah. We're getting to that place. This is to the madrega of the 5th level, to Yechidah. Let me ask you a question. I mean, this is totally like another way of pulling this out, but it's not going to really help your answer. But what do you do with the 5th cup? What do you actually do with it? So you know what you end up doing with it? You actually end up drinking it on the next night. So on one hand, you actually don't drink it, but it actually becomes wine of all the 4 cups. You following? So the 5th actually is not something that's reserved and pushed aside. The 5th, I don't imbibe, I don't drink, because if I drink, then I'm making it just another cup. The 5th is such a strong cup that it actually becomes all the cups. It becomes a cup of all the other 4 cups. Or if you're in Eretz Yisrael, it becomes a cup of your Kiddush, it becomes a cup of your life. In other words, that's the oimik of the 5th cup. The 5th cup actually pervades, infuses every single dimension. So let's go back to this Nakudim. I'm tired. I'm pushing myself not to be tired. I'm not tired. I am. I just am. In my amness, I'm not tired. I am tired. But if I can just reclaim that wholeness of that I am, I don't know if it's going to translate, but if I can reclaim that wholeness of who I am, not in contrast to my lower self that I'm not am, because my lower self is also I am. If I can do that, I'm actually including my tiredness in the context of a higher state of redemption. And that's the madrega of the fifth madrega. It's not I'm going to say I need to exclude that in order to become that. Because if I'm excluding something, by definition, it's still back to the world of duality of Akash and the Teretz. And Akash and the Teretz, I'm just stuck again. So I did the nice Seder, but tomorrow I'm back to the same person. Because I never really reached any type of madrega. This is actually, if you look at Yetzias Mitzrayim, there's 2 things. There's Vitzesi, Vitzalti, V'galti, V'lakachti, which is the 4. But then there's madrega that Hashem says that that on the night of Chatzos Alayla is, what's a Chatzos Alayla? No, but it's really Chatzos. The Moshe Rabbeinu have to say Chatzos. But what's a Chatzos Alayla? There's no Chatzos Alayla is a new thing that was revealed in Yetzias Mitzrayim. It doesn't exist before that. Yeah. No, that's what Moshe said. But I'm saying it's really Chatzos. What is Chatzos Alayla? Chatzos Alayla there was never such a time zone. There was the morning, there was the evening, there was night. We know all the time zones the Torah talks about. It never talked about a Chatzos. Because what is Chatzos? Chatzos is the midpoint that actually holds darkness and light at one time.
Between 11:59 and 12.
No, it's the Nakuda that actually is no, it's not an in-between. It's not in between. It's actually...
No, we can't comprehend.
Right, we can't. It's both.
We don't have a
It's a nois afachim. The Chatzos is a nois afachim. That was the Ki Chatzos Alayla. And Hashem says, I will be in Eretz Mitzrayim. And Hashem says, I, which is Ani, Loi Malach, Loi Soraf, which means I'm not in a duality. I'm talking about Ani. Anoich Hashem, the Atzmos, the highest madrega. Where is that? In Ani B'Sayich Mitzrayim. I don't need to take you out of Mitzrayim. If I take you out of Mitzrayim, then tomorrow you're going to get back into Mitzrayim. I need you to recognize Ani Yotze B'Sayich Mitzrayim, that there's a redemption in Mitzrayim. You're going to be in Mitzrayim. And when you're going to be in Mitzrayim, in the revealing of the Chatzos, which is the Zman that holds. This is why the Mekubalim say that Chatzos is the highest time in the day. That you have to be very, because that's the time that's Mechaber Yom V'Layla. If I can be in that place that's holding that paradox of those two, that's the crux. That's the highest madrega. That's why you have to eat. I think there's a guy that long Chuvas Avnezer. I haven't thought about this in a while. Is it Chuvas Avnezer? I have to look it up again. But the Avnezer Tainas. That really the mitzvah of eating the Korban Pesach is by Chatzos Alayla. It's actually that moment. We can't be magder. So he says Tul Chatzos, but actually the mitzvah is to eat it in that, to get to that point, to get to the Chatzos. He talks about it on a lamdish way. I'm saying that's the oimik of that shot. You have to get to the point where actually the nois afachim is Ani Yotze B'Sayich Mitzrayim. Ani Yotze B'Sayich Mitzrayim is that I am so large that I include everything from my place of wholeness. In my wholeness, I hold that space, and I'm not afraid of that part of me that's tired, because if I am full, that place of tiredness will just be subsumed in my bigger self that will allow me to do something. and not be tired. Not because I'm going to fight with myself, and not that it's a contrary to my tired. It's like, I'll give you, let's say, maybe a very simple example. If you're very, 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 very happy, let's say your child is getting married, and it's 1:00 in the morning, and you're dancing at your child's wedding. It's not 1:00 in the morning then, but you're very, very tired. It's emes. You're talking very, very tired, but you're still dancing. You understand? That's a gil of Yechidah. That's a gil of the quality, which I'm not fighting myself to dance. I'm not like pushing myself. Oh, I'm going to dance now because my daughter's wedding. I'm just so in that place of joy that despite or included within the fact that I'm actually tired, I'm still dancing. That's a redemption. That's a redemptive moment. That's the chatzois alayla. That's the oimek of that space that holds the night and the day. That's the hidden fifth. So Chazal, this is in their genius way. Chazal don't want to tell you the fifth level, right? Because if Chazal would tell you, okay, here's the fifth level, you can do this. We're back to square one. Then we're doing a seder. The seder is azay. Now we're going to get the fifth level. No, we're going to say the seder seems like a 4. But if you have enough seichel, you understand. Wait a second, but there's a hidden fifth character always going on. The hidden fifth thing's always happening. I understand that really what I'm trying to get to the place is to that thing. And this is talking what the AriZal says. We're gifted this. This is a gift. This is a gift from Maila. That you have to zustellen. You have to just make sure you show up to the seder. That we're gifted the madrega, this highest madrega of godless Yisha and godless Sheni. That the Eibusher gives us this koyach that we should actually reach some true freedom. Then after this, go through another Pesach, and this is another. Okay, yeah, fine. We ate matzah tomorrow. Okay, fine. It's nice. You did the mitzvah and you get a big Eden. But if you really want that it should be taka redemption, we have to make sure that we're taka connected on a deep level. Say that this is be'erich what's going on. Klar? Okay, you have to think about it. It's not
In the Yechidah doesn't have to be Torah either.
It's klar and not klar. It's all together. It's chatzos alayla. It's chatzos alayla, but it's redemption. It's redemption. It feels whole. It feels complete. It feels there. You feel present. You feel nirtzah. That's why nirtzah is the madrega 15th. That's the 15th level. It's the madrega 5. It's 5 encoded, right? What do you do by nirtzah? Nirtzah, you do nothing. You do nothing. You don't do nothing. It's nirtzah. Nothing to do, or don't do, whatever. It doesn't matter. Understand? That's why nirtzah. Some people do this. Some people do this. Some people don't do that. Don't do this. It's fine. Whatever you do is fine. That's the madrega of nirtzah. That's the madrega. Shine. Yeah.
And there's 10 in the Seder. There's 10.
15.
There's 15.
15. Of course, it has to be 15. It has to be 5. By the way, this is a sefer that just came out on the Haggadah. It's not Haggadah. I want to be very clear. It's the Hagdama for the Haggadah. Brit Hashem next year the Haggadah will come out.
You didn't get to have an Haggadah.
Huh? That was 20 pages. This is a 500-page thing. It's just the Hagdama for the.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, Jordan, Nevada.
The Seder is.
What's the connection between Chatzos Alayla and Etzem HaYom?
Huh?
Yeah, but Etzem HaYom is the essence of the day. It's like the time of the highest level of clarity, which is different. So Etzem HaYom is already Nimol Avram. Etzem HaYom is Avram is Chesed and.
You got it already?
Chatzos is not Laila. Chatzos is Chatzos. This is Chatzos HaYom. Chatzos is Laila. It doesn't matter. Chatzos is the midpoint that's tying darkness to light, light to darkness. It's not. That's what I'm saying. Chatzos Laila doesn't have a continuous light. The gather of Chatzos is that it's an akudah. It's an akudah. It's one akudah. Okay.